Okay, so we're here with Steve Jermanok, and he's just written a book. He's a very well-known travel writer and runs his own boutique travel agency. Steve, it's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Francis. Great to be here.
Yeah, well, it's great to see you. I know you've been busy writing the book, and it's coming out, I think, July 2nd.
Correct.
Why don't you tell us a little bit more about you and how you came to write this book and a little bit of your background?
Well, it goes way back to 1995 when I was doing some work for Arthur Fromer, the great travel writer. He had a newsletter called Arthur Fromer's Trips and Travels. And I believe I did a story on whitewater rafting in Finland. I did a story about fishing for striped bass off of the Statue of Liberty, which was you could access at that point. But anyway, he came to me and said, Steve, and he's very direct, Arthur Fromer, Steve, I have a book for you. And he had a collaboration with Outside Magazine, and he wanted me to write Outside Magazine's Adventure Guide to New England. So pretty much the entirety of 1995, that's exactly what I did. I wrote the book and went on like often 2 mountain climbs a day, sea kayaking, mountain biking, you name it, pretty much all seasons, all during the year. And and it was published in 1996. But what it did, that book led to really a fruitful career as a travel journalist. Those stories that I found out there in New England, not only did I have a blast, but the stories I found, like it was the beginning stages of mountain biking and the Kingdom Trails, which is one of the foremost trails in all of the country right now, were just being built. So that led to a story for Outside Magazine. And sea kayaking was also starting, and that led to a story at Indian Sea Kayak for, I think it was Islands Magazine, the Maine coast. So it began, it started from there, really the book, but then it led to about 700 articles, and I was a columnist at Boston Magazine, a columnist at Boston Globe, as well as doing a lot of columns for Yankee Magazine. So it was a lot of articles to dig in from. And what I wanted to do actually was for the 25th anniversary of that book, was to write a book that pretty much all the content I've done in the past 25 years on the region that I've never had the chance to put into a book.
Wow, that sounds exciting. So in terms of the book and the idea for the book, it was a culmination of all the work that you've done. When did you start to write the book?
Really, I got back from San Antonio and a wedding in Austin. This was March 7th, and then we had the big clampdown in Massachusetts due to COVID-19. So that was the time I said, Steve, you're never going to have this time again where you might be in your house for a long period of time, and you have this opportunity to finally get your thoughts together and pen this book that you wanted to do.
And so how was it writing during the pandemic? Did you find that easy to focus and sit down, or are you distracted by everything that's going on?
Actually, a big project like this, something I could really dig into that wasn't just a small article that I'm used to writing. It was great. It was, to be honest, it helped me out immensely with the anxiety of the epidemic. So it was actually nice to have something I could dig into. And I was delighted to look at some of these stories. Again, these are a lot of content I've done over the years. And to see some of these stories again and to rewrite it and go really deep into these concepts once again was a blast.
And so just so I may have not said the title of the book, give us the title of the book.
It's New England in a Nutshell.
New England in a Nutshell. And so tell me who, all the travel restrictions and all things considered, who's the best audience for this book? Is it a book that everyone could pick up? Is it people traveling to New England? Give me a sense for that.
But really, this is the reason I wrote this book now. It's really people who have been penned up in their houses for the last 3 months to get out there gradually and do some of these day hikes, day bike rides, you name it. There's history, culture, food, art, outdoors, just great drives. So it's really meant for all ages, from anybody from a teenager who wants to tackle a big climb to honeymooners who want to find a resort to go to that's open right now, to have a honeymoon if they do get married during these times. to families. There's a lot on families, a whole section including wildlife viewing like moose or whales.
Oh,
And
wow.
to, octogenarians, there's 17 great walks. So, it's really for all ages. I want people to appreciate New England, especially if you're close by or live in New England, to really get a feel for the mountains and the ocean. It's fantastic part of the country that we live in.
Right, and there's such a diversity. Wherever you are in New England, there's always something. There's something for everyone, for sure. So, is the book organized into all those different sections? Like, if I wanted to say find a great road trip in New England, I could find that in the book.
That's correct. That would be under for the romantic section. So there's 6 different sections. There's
Okay.
actually 50 categories in all, over 50 categories in all, and 300 entries. And what I did was distill it down into a roundup format so it's easy to read. So there's, such categories as 6 hidden art historical gems to, 6 favorite lobster clam shacks to 8 summer drives to keep you smiling. And for you and literary traveler readers, 4 best literary landmarks.
Okay. Give us a taste is there something you can give us a taste of in there?
Well, here, I got one for you that you'd like. This stems from a Boston Globe story on Hartford. And this is one of my literary landmarks. It's on the Harriet Beecher Stowe house, the great abolitionist in Hartford. So here we go.
Oh, wow. That sounds like a good one. Definitely. I don't think I've even been there, so I'm going to have to definitely check that out.
I'll read the entry if you'd like.
Oh, yeah. Read the entry. Yeah, sure.
It's short. All these are short. That's why I want to get people there. That's the main thing. So Harriet Beecher Stowe's humble abode is just a short stroll away from Mark Twain's house, under the tall hemlocks and past the expansive magnolia tree. Stowe moved here in 1873 with her preacher husband, long after she had experienced world acclaim for writing Uncle Tom's Cabin, as well as the depth of sorrow from the drowning of her 19-year-old son on the Dartmouth, New Hampshire campus. Walk into the front parlor and peer at the many watercolors around the room, and you soon realize that Stowe was also an accomplished artist. Upstairs is a small chair where a 4-foot, 11-inch woman would sit. It was Abraham Lincoln who commented on her diminutive stature, saying, "So you're the little lady who started this big war." Also intriguing is a drug box inscribed with her name that includes arsenic, used at the time to lighten a woman's complexion.
Wow. Wow, that was great. That was great. It reminds me of, you never know when you go into one of these literary or historical sites what you'll encounter. Whether it's an artifact that sparks an idea for an article, or someone working there gives you an anecdote or tells you something interesting. So it's really...
That's why I want people to get out there. There's wonderful historical sites. And actually right near that's the Mark Twain house, which is also in the book, a great literary landmark.
Wow. A question thinking, Steve, will this be available in an ebook format so people could kind of take it and click through and so forth?
Yeah, I have it both in paperback and ebook. The ebook has the hyperlinks, so you can simply, there in the Harriet Beecher Stowe house, link it, and there you have it. You have all the directions how to get there. And I also love the index I put in. So, for instance, with Harriet Beecher Stowe, I have all the regions in Connecticut nearby that you could go, like have a pizza or a lobster roll, or other historical sites, everything that's really nearby that. So it's all split into geographical regions as well.
Okay, wow. Now, are there any, that was a great literary anecdote. Are there any stories that you particularly would want to share from the book? Or you said you written, how many articles did you say?
Over 700.
Over 700. Do you have a favorite anecdote that you'd like to share, or something from the book that you'd like to tell folks about?
Well, like a lot of these places stem from our own history of traveling, especially my family. And there's a section just on Bar Harbor, which has 8 things to do in Bar Harbor in Acadia National Park. That includes going with Diver Ed, which my daughter, a photo in the book, the paperback, and I think on the ebook as well, is a photo of a lobster on my daughter's head, from the Boston Globe story where I actually wrote originally. And it's about going down with this guy who's like, he has the apparatus on, the scuba apparatus, He goes in and finds a lobster and brings it back, and he entertains the families on top of this boat on the outskirts of our harbor. But there's a lot of places, and what I really loved traveling around New England this past quarter century are the fringes of the region. It's 2 hours from Boston to Portland, but people don't realize it's another 6 hours from Portland to Allagash, where you can go paddling on the Allagash River. Maine is huge, and there's one hike in particular that's in my 10 classic New England hike section that I love to read. It's called Gulf Haggis, and it's probably about a 6-hour drive from Boston, about 4 hours from Portland. And it's one of my favorite hikes. And if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, I'd love to hear it.
When a raging river drops precipitously through narrow canyon walls, the result is a series of frothy waterfalls and swimming holes so frigid that only a native Mainer could dip his head. Smack dab in the 100-mile wilderness region, the 8-mile Gulf Haggis hike is a remote wilderness gem. A 45-minute drive on dirt roads from Greenville, Gulf Haggis is a gorge carved by the pounding waters of the Pleasant River and lumberman's dynamite. A series of exquisite waterfalls await you as the river drops nearly 500 feet in 2.5 miles through the narrow walls of the Slate Canyon. You should give yourself at least 7 hours to enjoy the entire loop. Extended routes, large boulders, and sheets of rock make walking slow, and you'll want to stop numerous times to take in the views and swim. Buttermilk Falls is an apt name for the frothy white foam the water becomes as it churns down the rocks. A swimming hole just beyond the falls is a favorite place for hikers to strip down to their undergarments and plunge into the auburn red waters. Those piercing screams heard are just folks getting used to the icy temperature.
How cold is the water?
It's cold. You believe
wow.
me? It's a wake-up call.
That's great. So, that's one of the things that I love about New England is that you could be somewhere like Portland and then you go off to Maine and further deep in and you just don't know what you'll come up with. There's a lot of undiscovered places.
Yeah, I want people to realize there's a lot of islands out there besides Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket. I have a lot of sections on biking Block Island, Islesboro off of Lincolnville, Maine. I have a section on taking a walk in the Boston Harbor Islands, which I love. I've done stories for Yankee Magazine on being overnight actually in the Boston Harbor Islands. So the islands are really a great place to explore and to have some social distancing. There's not many people outside of Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard, which are the most popular.
Right. And some of those islands are great in Boston Harbor. I think we went maybe a couple of summers ago. I went with my youngest son out. I think it was at Fort Warren.
Right.
And that was neat. And you could kind of get lost and you would never know unless you went out there that was there.
Yeah, it's a great place to explore an old Civil War era fort. And then from there, you can go out to other islands like Grape, where you can go on hikes and again, paddle. It's a great opportunity to even spend the night, camp.
So it sounds like there's a little bit of everything. There could be a road trip. There could be a hike. There could be some great recommendations for, great seafood in some New England cuisine. So it sounds like there's a little bit of everything in the book.
Yeah, I try to appeal to as many people as possible. I really want them to get out and explore the region. I think it's a fantastic part of America to really see the history, the arts, the food. The one thing that I was digging into my notes actually and seeing that really didn't work, that really wasn't topical, were high-end restaurants. A lot of those James Beard award-winning restaurants that I wrote about 15 years ago, like L'Espalier or Hammersley's Bistro in Boston, they're gone. So I didn't put high-end restaurants. You can find those on the web very easily. But I did put my favorite lobster shacks and clam shacks, my favorite pizza joints, and other little things I love, like the Portuguese food in New Bedford, a cheese maker that I love in Vermont. So I wanted more of an authentic appeal.
Wow, that sounds great. Now, tell us a little bit, it kind of gets me excited to go back out and travel. Now, have you done any traveling during the pandemic, or have you been kind of focused on home and writing and so forth?
Right now, mostly it's been day trips. So if I am going anywhere, it's like the Halibut Point and Rockport, or down to Wingershik Beach. So it's been very slight. I did book an Airbnb in July for Cape Cod, East Ham, an area
Okay.
a lot in the Cape.
Okay. Now, tell us a little bit. Now, you are not only an expert, an accomplished travel writer, but you're an expert traveler, and you guide other people and book trips for them. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about Active Travels?
Yeah, Active Travels opened in 2012. It's an offshoot of the travel writing I've been doing this past 25 years. So what was happening was that stories I wrote for Boston Globe, I'd often get a lot of email from readers saying, hey, where should I stay? How do I get there? So it was follow-up emails. So I dragged my wife into the business. She was an art historian actually at the Danforth Museum in Framingham. She's now co-founder of Active Travels with me, and we book trips pretty much around the world. So a lot of the contacts, I've done a lot of stories, not only on New England, but around the globe. And it led to a lot of relationships with guides around the world. And now we set up those clients with those same guides. So that was a reason for doing this book now, because as you know, with COVID-19, travel plummeted. And there's not nearly the demand as there would be right now in the summer. So that time led me to go back to my roots, and I'm happy to do that.
Now, what are you advising travelers coming to New England now? Are there certain restrictions people should be paying attention to?
There are restrictions. It's a good question. So like in Maine, for example, they're requiring people to have a negative COVID-19 test done within 72 hours of arriving in Maine, or self-quarantine for 14 days. So, you have to be careful about entering some of the states. Maine is one, Vermont's another one, especially for Bostonians and New Yorkers. They are really restricting it just to people in northern tier of New England. So you have to be up and see what's going on. Right now, Mass, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Connecticut are the most lenient of all states.
Okay, that's good to know. You mentioned in the release for the book that there was a portion that you were doing some things to help other businesses, some of the businesses that you've written about.
Oh, absolutely. This is one of the really true to my heart. The whole travel industry it took a big hit. And this includes it could be the Clam Shack or the Lobster Roll place, Woodman's in Cape Ann, to Salter Inn in Bar Harbor, a small innkeeper, to even like PBD Essex Museum. People aren't going to the art museums. So what I'm trying to do is, with half the proceeds from this book, I'd like to get gift cards to people who buy the book and raffles, and give back to the travel community that nurtured me all these years. So we're going to do that, and I'm happy to help those people.
Wow, that's great. And so people can find more information about the book and on your website, or should they go to Amazon?
Find it on the homepage of Active Travels. You'll see it there. You can also, see it on Amazon. They can book from Amazon, both the paperback and the Kindle version. And you can contact me at steve@activetravels.com. And please tell me that you purchased a book, and I'll put you into the raffle.
Wow, that's great. Now, tell us a little, I talk to people in the travel space and I say, well, what do you think is happening and where are things headed? Give us a sense, and it's not to put you on the spot, but where do you see travel over the next 6 months to a year?
6 months to a year, it's going to be regional. Like, we have a trickling of people contacting us now to book trips. Mostly it's North America. I see very few people are interested in international trips, especially without a vaccine. Once the vaccine happens, I do expect it to return to normal. I'm hoping that this pause in travel right now has governments thinking about their travel approach, especially with regards to overpopulation in places like Venice or Barcelona, where they've had far too many travelers. I also think needs to be more oversight for cruise lines, for example, which I think expanded greatly over the last decade, but are impacting all these cities around the world, as well as global warming. So I think there needs to be more oversight of the travel industry as a whole. And I hope this pause has governments looking at how their country can best, obviously it's a big economy builder, travel, but how to do it the right way.
Right. And do you see certain sectors of the travel economy? Do you see that the cruise lines taking a longer time to build back up?
Yes, it's gonna, what happened with the cruise lines, especially would be people being stuck on those cruises during COVID-19 was horrible. So it is going to take them a little bit more to get back, but they'll get back. But I hope that they do it in a responsible way.
Yeah. And do you see it affecting like bigger cities in the United States travel or in Europe, and like will less
I,
people be?
I don't. I think people will come back once they feel safe, even to places like New York, to places like Boston. They'll come back. They just want to make sure they're safe and that the numbers are down for the
Right.
pandemic. But
Right.
I see that coming back a lot quicker than I see people taking those long haul flights to Kenya and Tanzania or Australia again. So I think it's more going to be a limitation of it's comfort level, and that's how it's going to expand out next year or two.
Wow. Okay, that makes sense. Well, Steve, this has been great to have you on and to get more. I've known you for a while, and I know I can vouch for you that you're the real deal. Are
Thank
there any thoughts that you want to leave people with about the book? I mean, I know I'm excited. I'm going to get a copy and read it and use it to do some traveling around New England. So,
I just want people to get out there and explore. We really are blessed with a fantastic region: mountains, ocean, food, art, history. It's a great place to reacquaint yourself with the region. So please just take a copy of the book and get out there. That's why it's there.
great. Well, thank you so much, Steve. This was great. I really appreciated it.
Thank you, Francis. Thanks for the time.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
Terrific.